Before I ever took up fly fishing, I had read a whole bunch about it. My Uncle Claude gave me Joseph Bates's book, and I'd stare at the plates of fly patterns, picking out the ones that I thought were the coolest. There was a series of little brook, brown, and rainbow trout flies. When I took up fly tying, this is one of the earliest streamers I attempted. I spent my first summer out of college out west, working on national forest. I made a stop in Colorado and fished the Taylor River between Crested Butte and Gunnison. I knew so little about fly fishing for trout, had no idea what to use, but I tied on this cool fly and swung it through a pool. Within a few casts, this big brown trout swatted it. So when tying streamers like this, I really like using a hook with a limerick bend and a 6x long shank. The tail and the wing of the fly use dyed bucktail. I'm just going to take a little clump here to make the tail with. And then you just kind of even up the tips of it. You can use a hair stacker. I just find this quicker for long strands of bucktail. Now for the ribbing, you're going to want to use metal tinsel. They have mylar tinsel that looks nice but has no strength to it at all. A couple of strikes and it'll fall apart. And yes, this is mylar I'm using in the video because I didn't have any of the right size metal tinsel to use. Do as I say, not as I do. So here I am building up a body out of white yarn. You can use dubbing as well. I find yarn is just easier and quicker to wrap on. So getting back to that day on the Taylor River, I had that big brown on for a second or two, long enough to get a really good look at its size, and then it came off. At the time, I had never gotten a brown trout, nor seen a trout over a foot long. That one might have been 18 inches or so, and seeing it was like being struck by lightning. I used the same fly the whole morning and got some strong, beautiful rainbow trout that are almost as big as that brown. And I still have the fly from that day. So we're going to tie off the yarn body and then we can wrap our tinsel rib over the top of it. So you make your wraps evenly spaced using good firm tension. Now we're ready to tie on our throat, which will just be some barbules from a red feather. Kind of suggests gills. And now we can build our wings, starting with some pink bucktail. Whenever you're cutting off bucktail, try to trim it close to the skin. Here I am pulling out the shorter pieces of fur, and then I'm going to even up the tips like I did before with the tail. You lay them alongside the shank to size them before you tie them in. Be sure to keep good tension on the thread when you're tying in the bucktail because you don't want it rotating around the shank whenever you catch a fish. And now we're ready for a layer of green bucktail. There can be a tendency to make your wings big and bushy, but really, a streamer fly needs to have kind of a sparse dressing and a slim profile to make it more baitfish-like. Now right here I make a bit of a rookie mistake. You can see how I cut into the tying thread when I trim the ends of the hair. Luckily I'm able to save that by just kind of wrapping around it to anchor them in. And I'm going to blame that on when I was tying this, I wasn't looking at the fly itself, rather I was looking through the viewfinder of the camera, which made it much harder. So here I'm going to give the wing a topping of natural brown bucktail hair, just a little bit. Now time to put the cherry on the sundae. This is jungle cock, and there's a lot of substitutes for it because this is an expensive material to get, but it's just cool stuff. It's a really cool feather and it looks great on the fly. There's a long tradition behind using it, so if you can acquire it, get some. One of the cool things about jungle cock is that the cross section of the stem is flat and just the correct axis, so that when you tie them on they lay flat against the body like they should. Now it's time to cover up all the ends and give it a whip finish. Now the hallmark of a good tire is to leave a small, neat head on your fly. And I could have gone smaller than this with this head, but you're better off having a slightly bigger head on your fly and having it strong than have a small head and having it fall apart. And finally we anchor everything down with the wife's nail polish. So I tied that last one so it looked like the old ratty one that I used in Colorado years ago. I tied this one with a more bolder shade of pink to look more like the one in the book. And this one is what steelheaders use. It's kind of a steelheaders variation of the little rainbow trout. Steelhead flies tend to be flashier. The substitution we make for the materials in the steelhead version is we use this pearlescent mylar tubing for the body. We just wrap it around the hook. The wing is this sparkly stuff, and instead of bucktail we use calftail. Calftail just has this wonderful translucence that's great for when you're wanting to make a flashy fly. You just have to pick out some tails that have the length you need.